welcome to the first of a new series looking at infantry tactics for World War III. There will be variations between countries, but these are some good general comments that will get you hopefully thinking the right way. The rules we're using are 7 Days to the River Rhine by Great Escape Games. I'll put a link to them in the description. All of the various products that you'll see in the game, I will actually put a link in the description so you can actually have a look at them if you want to recreate this. The American platoon that we're going to use has got 3 squads. They're represented by the 3 bases. Please ignore the colours. I usually colour code my platoons, but I just grabbed some random figures for this because I'm only using 1 platoon. There is also a 4th stand, which as you can see is smaller. That's actually a gun team. However, that is being used as the gun teams and the platoon headquarters. So it's roughly the same strength as a standard infantry unit. Therefore, I've actually treated it the same in game terms. When moving across open country, platoon will generally adopt the 1-up. Occasionally it will reverse it and have a 2-up, which means that one squad is moving ahead, acting as almost a recce, although it doesn't have the recce special rule, but it's moving forward, it triggers the fire, and then the others can react around it. Sometimes you will go 2-up, leaving 1 in reserve, but this arrowhead effect is generally what you will use. In reality, spacings between the sections might be 100 metres in open country like this. Going to the other side of the table then, we have a Russian squad. It's currently using hidden and ambush rules. I'm going to put the abbreviated versions up on the screen. There's a lot of rules that I haven't been bothered including with that, the ones for vehicles and recce troops observing. So the unit is tucked away there, and until it actually acts, it's going to be using a marker to represent it. In game terms, you actually have 1.5 times as many markers as you have units, so you actually can cause a bit of confusion for the opposing player. In the game, you need to use command tokens to actually do anything. Now, these are generated on a rate of 1 per stand, with a bonus 2 if you have a command unit on the table. Transport units and helicopters, however, do not generate command points. What I've done for the purpose of this is assumed that because this is a high activity area, both sides have allocated 2 extra command points to this each turn, which means there'll be 2 units elsewhere on a larger table in a larger battle who wouldn't actually be active. So, turn 1. The American player has the initiative, so they're going to activate a unit. We're going to activate the squad and move it up to the hedge line using a double activation, making a rapid move which lets them move 9 inches. No reaction from the Russian player, so NATO can now activate a 2nd unit, and again going to use a rapid move to move up to cover. All of the cover I've put on this one I'm going to treat as very rough ground. It works better for the example. In reality, on an ordinary table, you probably treat most of this as ordinary rough rather than the heavy rough. So we'll activate now the 3rd unit, the platoon commander, bring him up to the hedge line. Notice we've now gone from having a 1-up to a 2-up. Because there is a linear obstacle of the road, you try and maximise the firepower if anything does appear. Bring up the final squad. Now, in most games where you're not passing back and forth, that would be everything done, but we still have 2 tokens left. What I would probably do in a larger game at this point is pass the initiative back to the Russians, because I've now spent half of my points or more. However, we'll assume that the Russians are doing something elsewhere. and it therefore doesn't come up. So we now need to reactivate another unit. I'm going to have to roll for this now because there's already one token down, so I need to roll more than that, so I will need to roll a 2 or more to activate that unit. Okay, and we've rolled a 1. So predictably what that means is that action doesn't happen. So we'll try activate it again, and again we're going to try a move order. We can't rapid move because you're crossing an obstacle. You can only rapid move in the open. So rolling the dice, we've got a 4, so we can move. Now we need to roll for the obstacle, needing a 4 or more, and unfortunately we've rolled a 2. So that all that happens is the unit moves to the other side of the linear obstacle. If I'd been moving into the woodland, I would have reached the edge of the woodland, moved inside and stopped. If I'd rolled higher, I could have carried on the movement. And there's the end of turn 1. So, turn 2. Normally we'd roll for initiative at the start of a turn. However, since the Russians are all still in ambush and nothing has been revealed, the Americans will automatically be going first. So, we've now got the Americans. One has got an exposed unit in the road, so that is the obvious unit to activate first and to move it just across the road into cover. The others are in a nice covering position if he did come under fire. The Russian player decides he's going to withhold his fire for a little bit longer. So, having managed to bring up the right flank, the Americans now look at the left flank. Because the unit hasn't activated already and it's got no morale markers, it's going to be an automatic activation. There's the obstacle cross first of all for the trees. It's making a move order. Now that move order gets that across. We've still got the rest of the movement, and as we continue to move forward we hit the second obstacle. We're going to roll that one. Technically, because even if we fail it, we'd end up on the other side, and that was the maximum movement. It's not actually going to make any particular difference. Normally, the Russian player would have tried to react immediately the actions were declared, but because the American unit only moved into sight as part of its second action, it works slightly differently. It activates at that point. So, the Russian player tries to react, needing a 3+, and rolls it, and because it's the first activation of the game from ambush and it was successful, the initiative automatically passes to the Russian player. So the Russian player rather predictably decides that it's going to open fire well within the 12-inch range. Not going to bother with a second action. The option could have been to move, but they want to hold that position. So let's roll to hit. So we have a hit, and that inflicts 1 morale token. Now, can we convert that to a second one? Dice are rolled again, and a unit in the open is relatively easy to convert a second hit on. For that, it converts on a 4, 5 or 6. If the target had been in cover, it would have been a 5 or a 6. So we roll, and on a 3, that's not enough to give a second hit. Now the Russian player, because they still have initiative, is going to activate again, doing another fire order. The American player now tries to interrupt and react to that. So the unit is actually in cover, so they need a 5 to do it, and unfortunately they don't succeed. So we're back to our Russian player, who's now going to fire again. So they fire again, and again achieve a hit. And player, again using their final activation, they decide they are going to put a third lot of fire down on the same squad. So again they try and roll to hit and succeed, and This time they do actually convert, so we're now up to 4 hits on that stand. That stand is not in a good way. So it's the American player now, because the Russians run out of command tokens. So what's the American player going to do? It's not an easy position to be in, this. So this squad is just out of range. So what the American player decides he's going to do is he's going to try and bring up another squad, but use the cover this time. Because these are slight embankments, I'm going to treat them as cover for the fences and the hedges. So, first squad activates. And it's trying to move forward to this point and then fire. So, does it cross the obstacle? No. That's bad news. So we'll try and spend a second point to activate them again. And 2, they actually succeed. So they can move and fire, so they move up to there, and now return fire on the Russian unit. So, as a modifier, they're going to actually do a fall back. Now, fall back orders are slightly different. So, when you're doing a fall back order, it's classed as a double action. Still have to activate normally, but they ignore the pin markers, or round markers. So I need 2 or more and succeed. So let's try and cross the obstacle. Yes, they've crossed the obstacle. I'm only going to fall them back to there. Now this time when you put the morale markers, the activation markers down, they go face down to show that unit has now fallen back and can no longer act. You roll a d6 to see how many you remove, and the good news is we've actually rolled a 4, so they are all actually removed. So, next turn, let's see who gains initiative, and this time it's the Russian player. So the Russian player has advantage, and immediately activates the squad to open fire on the same one that we were firing at a second ago. The American player decides they're going to try and interrupt this with the centre section, and unfortunately, the roll like that, they fail, so that fails to actually achieve anything. So the Russian player fires, and this time misses. Initiative remains with the Russians, so they're going to activate again, and the Americans are going to try and activate the target squad this time, and they actually succeed. So the Russian player gets to fire as his first action, and hits. Does it convert? No, it doesn't. So the American player can now move. Now, considering it's already got these markers, we said it was going to fire. So what they're actually going to do is something slightly different. They're actually going to lay down smoke as the fire action to obscure the view. So, back to the Russians, and the Russians decide to pass. They want to see what the Americans are actually going to do this time. So, initiative passes to the Americans. Now at this point the platoon commander is going to activate. He's on an automatic activation. He's going to do a move and fire. So, try and cross the hedge line. Makes it, so can move fully up to the next bit of cover and can fire from there. Rolls to hit and misses, so that doesn't achieve anything. So they've still got initiative. We're now going to use the squad on the right to lay down some fire. Okay, does it actually manage to achieve it? And yes, it does. It rolls to hit, hits, but doesn't convert into a second one. So the Russian unit takes a morale marker. Initiative is still with the Americans, they're going to try exactly the same again, put more firepower down, using the same unit, which makes its roll, and rolls to hit, and this time it misses. So the Americans have got one order left, which they're going to use on the platoon commander. See if he can activate. And no, he fails. So initiative flips back to the Russians because the Americans used all their actions. So what's the Russian player going to do? He's lost his primary target, but we're going to open up instead on the platoon commander. Got line of sight. That's obscured, so we're going to fire onto this one. They could have fired there, but so we're going to fire. And this time they hit and fail to convert. And that's the end of the turn. Turn 4, and this time the Americans win initiative and decide to go first. The first squad they're going to activate is the centre squad, and this time it requires a roll because it has one morale marker already. They make the roll. The Russian player decides that they want to try and interrupt this, so they place the marker, they roll and succeed, getting a 6, which gives them the initiative. They roll to hit, and not only a hit, they also, requiring a 5 because of the cover, get a 5, which converts it to a second morale marker. So I'm just going to move the figures, and then what I'll do is put the marker on. So the American squad moves around the corner of the hedge, the fence, sorry. There's those markers, and let's just upgrade that to the extra 2 hits. And with the pins getting dangerously high, the American player decides that the best option is probably, rather than firing, to throw smoke, rolls for it and achieves it. So, Russian action. Well, the Russians are now going to switch fire back onto the left American section and make the roll and achieve a hit. Does it convert? Yes. So the Americans are getting pinned down there as well. Now, at this point, the Russians decide, let's pass the advantage back over. So, American decision time. The original plan to go right flanking looks like it may have a problem because you haven't got fire supremacy at the minute. So, what we're going to do is use the special action, battle group morale test, to roll the dice and get a 3. So, it doesn't actually allocate to anybody specific this time, but I can remove one pin marker. And the big difference with this is, as you can see, we don't have to actually fall back. So, having done that, the Americans decide to try and activate the command section to put some fire down on the Russians, and succeed and achieve a hit which converts. So the Russians are getting very bogged down there. So now they've won the firefight, the Americans have got a bit of an advantage there. They're going to activate this squad and try and cross the hedge. They fail to cross the hedge, so they only get to there. So they're going to activate that unit again, and this time go for a rapid move, trying to cross that open ground. Anything bar a 1 and they're fine. So they now move up to this hedge line. getting into a nice flanking position on the Russians. And with one last command point, what we're going to do is another battle group morale test. And it's a 2, so I can remove one more. So that one removes, bringing that down to 2. And that is the end of the turn. Except for the Russians, who've got one activation left, and looking at that, they're going to use it as a battle group morale test and get a 6. Now the good news for that is that means they can remove all of those tokens. So the Americans, having won the firefight, suddenly look like they need to win it again. So we've rolled the dice, and this time the Americans get the initiative. So, interesting position at the minute. The Russians are intact. The Americans have got 2 units with a fair bit of morale issues. So what they're going to do first of all is use the command group to start putting fire down onto the Russian position. The Russians are going to try and seize initiative, and they react. So, Americans first. The Americans fire using their first action and miss. The Russians return fire and get a hit. Does it convert? Yes. So the Americans are getting bogged down here. So, Americans have still got the initiative. So we'll try and put some more fire down. Let's use that one. Now, needing a 3 or more to act this time and achieve it. So do they get a hit? No. Okay, so it's still initiative with the Americans. They're going to use this unit now, again requiring 3 or more to activate, and they achieve it. This time we do get a hit on the Russians. And does it convert? No. So the Russians have now got 1 morale token as well. Still aren't acting, so the Americans are going to use the command group again to put more fire down. Do they manage to do it? No, they failed this time. So American player is going to do exactly the same with this stand. Let's put some firepower down. And do they manage to activate? Yes, they do. Do they get a hit? Yes. Does it convert? No, it doesn't. So the Russians are now on 2 morale tokens. And the Americans at this point are going to pass. So it's back to the Russians. So the Russians decide to do a battle group morale test. And what do they achieve? 5, so they reduce that back to 1. And then they're going to use their next action to fire. So they're going to fire on the centre squad. Do they manage to activate? No, they don't. So it's back to the Americans. They've got 1 activation left. And what they're going to do is to move. No, they're not. They're going to put some more fire down. So we're going to use the. In fact, we'll use it as a battle group morale instead. And they don't actually remove any this time. So, bit of a bogged down turn without actually achieving too much. Americans start the initiative on this turn, and what they're going to do is start putting some fire down. They use this squad, and do they activate? Needing a 3? No, they don't. The Russians don't try and react yet, so the Americans will now try and activate the next squad, needing a 3 or more, and achieve it this time. Put the fire down and miss. Still no Russian reaction. So we'll fire with this squad again needing a 3 to activate, which they do. This time they hit, and they actually only do 1 hit of damage. So, the Russians still haven't tried to seize the initiative, so the Americans are going to action again. Put another bit of fire down, manage to make it, get a hit, and convert it. So this is not looking good for the Russians. So, American again, they've still got 2 activations left. So this time, they're very close to breaking that Russian squad, so we're going to put more firepower down. Do they activate? No, they don't. And this time they're going to pass the initiative back to the Russians. So the Russians, the first action, we're going to do a battle group morale check and get to remove 1 pin marker. And we'll do the same again. And with a 2, remove another 1. And at this point we'll actually try and activate them using a 3. And they succeed, and put some fire down on the American command unit and miss. So the initiative goes back to the Americans, who've got 1 action left, and we're going to try and activate the squad here. They're going to try and cross the obstacle, leaving a 4, and they fail. And their fire action, in fact they're not going to bother with fire action because it's the end of the turn. So, end of that turn. Initiative starts with the Russians this time. So, first thing the Russians are going to do is use a battle group morale test to remove some pin markers, and only remove another 1. So, still have initiative. They're now going to open fire on the American command team. Because they've got the pin marker, they're on a 1 and fail to act. So the Americans, are they going to start doing anything? The Russians pass. So the Americans are going to start by doing a battle group morale test and roll a 5. So we'll reduce that down to 1. Do a second check, which they succeed again, reducing that one to a 1. At this point then they're going to start opening fire, using a 2 or more to action. Yeah, roll to hit, and they've hit and convert. That's quite nasty from the Russian perspective. So, going to do the same with this stand and achieve it, but don't actually manage to get a hit. At this point we'll put another firepower down from that stand. So do they activate this time? Yes they do. Do they hit? Yes. And do they convert? Yes. So that's now up to 5. That Russian unit is now very close to being destroyed. And the American player, with just 1 token left, passes the initiative back to the Russians. Now the Russians at this point in reality probably do a fall back, but I'm going to play this one out so you can see the full assault. They're going to do a battle group morale test and get a 6. They've cleared it. That's really bad news for the American, who is going to put another marker down to try and open fire again. So needing a 3 or more, yeah, and a hit and convert. Now if the Russian player hadn't managed to do what he just did and remove those morale markers, that unit would have been destroyed. So this time the American player has got the initiative, and starts by opening fire. Yet makes it and achieves a hit which doesn't convert. So, still with the initiative, I'm going to put some more firepower down. This time activates but misses. Still retaining the initiative, we're going to put more firepower down here and fails to activate. So we're going to try the same approach here and fails to activate. And with only two morale tokens, so two activation tokens left, they are going to try yet more firing. We're going to try that. This time they do actually activate, just. They achieve a hit which fails to convert, bringing that up to 4. So, final activation, and they're actually going to activate this unit. Now this is a bit of a going for it approach. So the American unit is going to move and then fire. So the move finally pulls in the flanking attack. I hadn't pre-measured that, so I wasn't sure if that was going to work. And then they fire at that distance. So, do they achieve a hit? Yes, they do achieve a hit. Do they convert? Yes. So that reaches a 6, which means the Russian squad is actually removed from the game. And there you go. A full-scale flanking attack from an American platoon. Hope you found that useful.